and gentlemen, Mike Collins.
Good morning, all. Oh, come off it. We're a bit more enthusiastic, can't we? Are we sitting comfortably? Now, for some of you here, you know I'm a tour guide in the summer months. Do you really want me to talk to you like I'm a tour guide? Right. Okay, well, here's Mike Collins. Now, good morning, Mike.
Good morning.
Okay, now you're a graphic artist. Would you like to tell us something of some of the works that you've actually worked on?
Oh dear Lord, I mean, I've been drawing comics and doing illustration work for about the past 18 years, which just frightens me every time I think of it. I started off working for British Marvel, doing a lot of licensed comics for them. Transformers, which is now cool again. Doctor Who, which has never been cool, but we all love it. And are you proving me right or what? And I've done a lot of work with Star Trek, Babylon 5 in comic form. I'm currently the artist on a series of Star Trek novels which you download from the web. The Star Trek Starfleet Corps of Engineers, which is sort of like the maintenance division. The Enterprise will go in, sort out a situation, leave a mess, and the SC you have to go in afterwards and clean it up. So it's basically the Starfleet plumbing division. The books actually are great, and I do these covers for books that don't see print. They haven't realised how strange this is, and they keep paying me to do them, so I'm quite happy to carry on drawing. I've worked on a lot of the major American superheroes. I've drawn Superman, Batman, The Flash, the X-Men, Wonder Woman. And in British comics I've drawn Judge Dredd, Slane, Rogue Trooper, lots of stuff really. I mean the point is I've done so many different things for various people that I have no focus.
Now, Mike, you say you're basically doing Starfleet plumbing.
Yep.
Now, I'm a costume maker, and you obviously, with X-Men, Wonder Woman, Judge Dredd, you were drawing a costume-based character. What do you prefer doing? Technical things or people?
Ooh, that's a good question. I like drawing people. One of the great things about working in comics is that it's a medium for storytelling, just like film is, just like novels are, just like radio is. Comics have got this reputation of being just for kids in Britain. But if you go to Europe or Japan, then comics are accepted everywhere, just as another means of telling stories. For me as an artist, half the fun is through gesture, position, facial expression, telling a story as if I was using actors, as if I sort of was casting a film. So on the other side of that, I also love film design work. So in comics, you get to design fabulous alien cities, you get to design amazing vehicles and weaponry. So it's just, it's basically playing and getting paid for it. So it's a very good job.
Well, I don't know whether some authors would actually physically admit to it, but I know years ago I tried writing. Don't ask me about it, it was terrible. But do you ever get the feeling that you're playing God when you're designing things?
Ooh, playing God. No. One of the things about working in comics is that it's not you on your own. Every so often I will write and draw a book, but quite often I'm working with a writer, and even if I'm writing and drawing, I work with an editor. I did a comic strip for DC a few years back, which was called Peter Cannon Thunderbolt, which is a revival of an old 60s comic that DC bought the rights to. And my pitch to them was that what you do is you take your normal American superhero, you put him in London, and everything changes. So I had great fun sort of putting all these little references, the fact that nobody in London took him seriously. I sort of had all the staples from regular comics, so you had the feisty reporter, the slightly sleazy reporter, you had the cop that may or may not be the friend, and I just kept twisting things around on that. So the cop that may or may not be a friend was this East End guy who, before he joined the police force, was a wrestler, and he couldn't treat the superhero anything else as like one of his old wrestling buddies. Somebody's wandering around in a costume in the streets of London, he's a wrestler. So he refused to take him seriously. And on that strip, there was various things I was trying to push him out to just go, "You're not doing that, Mike." So God with a bigger God above me telling me not to do things.
Okay, staying with art. Now, around the room here we've got various pictures of boats and seascapes. Does any particular classical type of art inspire you? I mean, at your drawing board, do you have like classical paintings that you can look up when you're bored for a moment and find yourself getting lost in that picture? You know, you can really find yourself moving in it. Do you have anything like that, or anything inspires you like that?
Well, my studio is just full of art books. I like Renaissance painters. I like the Pre-Raphaelites. There's some wonderful illustration around the Pre-Raphaelites. I think because of the nature of the work I do, I'm more predisposed towards people that get classed as illustrators rather than real painters. There's a lot of 19th century American illustration work which is absolutely fabulous. There's work by a guy called Franklin Booth. There's a new book of his illustrations out that's called, what's it now? I think it's Painting with a Pen. And he did these wonderfully rendered ink drawings that were, it was like he was inspired by Dürer and didn't understand that that was all engraving. So that's actually how he drew. He drew as if he was engraving. And the work he gets across is amazing. So every so often when I'm stepping away from the comic stuff, everything being bold and brash, it's nice to go away and just look at something that somebody spent like a week on one picture, as opposed to, I guess, an hour generally, and just seeing how that's done. Working in art, I just enjoy art in all forms. It's just great to sort of see what people do. In terms of classical painters, get back to the 19th century again, one guy that just knocks me out is John Martin. There's a lot of his paintings in the Tate, and basically he was mad as a lorry. Whereas other people would take religious themes and have Jesus in a verdant field touching the lamb and just being all sweet, he decided to do things like the expulsion of Adam and Eve from Eden, which was paintings that are like taller than this room. And Adam and Eve are like that size, down there. And Eden fills the rest of it, and there's God and the angels at the top. Another one of his paintings is the war between heaven and earth, between heaven and hell, which is just insane. It's full of millions of angels. You have to step like about 3 yards back before you can actually see the damn picture. There's so much detail in it. And again, probably one of the appeals to me of his work is it's very illustrative. He's telling a story in a picture rather than just establishing a scene. I mean, the paintings around here are lovely, but they're very much just like a captured moment. There's no narrative. I think that's the thing that drives me with everything I do and everything I enjoy, is just capturing the narrative.
So, I mean, some years ago, because I used to have to walk with a crutch, and I was crutched a bit, and we with some other people, and we were in the cinema, and we went to see The Silence of the Lambs, and there wasn't exactly disabled facilities, so slightly what you're saying is how we saw The Silence of the Lambs. We had to sit right on the front seat, bang smack in the middle, and it was like you physically were sitting inside the picture. And it was a little bit like some of the things when Silence of the Lambs first hit the screen. What type of music do you like? What inspires you?
Ooh, music. Well, because I tend to sit alone all day, not talking to anybody apart from the dog, until the kids come from school. I have the radio on, I have music on, and now I've got a computer with a DVD player and films on in the background when I'm working. In terms of music, I think my favourite artist is probably Tom Waits. Again, because he's not doing, again, it's a treated as a medium. He's not painting pretty pictures, he's telling stories. All his songs are stories. There's an album by Nick Cave a couple of years ago called Murder Ballads, which is a wonderfully over-the-top, completely black comedy album where every track is about a murder. But it features him duetting with Kylie, and also PJ Harvey's on there as well, so it's a very strange album. I listen to a lot of film soundtrack music as well. That's quite good, sort of send you off. And quite often I'll find myself working and the phone will ring and it's like it's on another planet. I'm thinking, what is that noise? That's not the record. And the terrible thing is, well, if you're sitting at home working by yourself all day and the phone rings, you find you've forgotten how to speak. And it's a bit, but I tend to have music on most day long. What else do I like? Recent stuff. I've just got the Ash singles compilation, which is wonderful. Every song is fun and happy and up. So if I'm drawing a dark and nasty comic strip, I'm bouncing around the studio singing along, which just isn't quite natural.
So if you listen to film soundtracks, because I'm a collector and that's just, but do you have a particular favourite composer of film music? Well, let's be awkward, let's be British and American.
Ooh, favourite composers? I don't know if I do really. I think for me it's music that I associate with particular movies, and so the connection's there. The one I probably play to death is the Blade Runner soundtrack. So it was the first time I saw that movie when it opened back in, oh my god, 20 years ago?
Anybody?
Yeah. 82? Yeah. Something like that. I remember cycling to the cinema to see it. I just sort of fell in love with the film, and the music just captures it every time. I think for recent film music, probably Howard Shore's music to the Lord of the Rings is outstanding. It's just incredible pieces of music. And some of the music of Harry Potter I quite like as well. It's John Williams, isn't it, on that? Yeah. John Williams I like, but then it's almost like you get confused with some of the themes with his. It tends to run together just a little bit. I'm not a big fan of classical music, and I suppose being into film soundtracks is like edging me towards that, but not quite here. I think what else do I listen to? Other soundtracks. I mean, I've got a very Catholic taste, so I will listen to a badly drawn boy album followed by a film soundtrack followed by a 1938 Carnegie Hall jazz concert. It's just entertainment for my brain while my hands are drawing, I think.
So you're saying with music, then John Williams predominantly is he's a string composer. For me, I like Goldsmith. I don't know, maybe it comes with something being a tour guide because I'm too loud, and Goldsmith has a love of brass and things like that. But you associate purely from film rather than an actual composer.
Yeah.
So I suppose this naturally leads. You said Blade Runner as one of your favourites. Let's be well. Top 3 favourite films of all time, so that inspire you.
Ooh, top favourite 3 films. I'd say Blade Runner is probably number 1. Possibly the Blues Brothers, and for just being completely off the wall, I think probably Kentucky Fried Movie, which is one that I can just sit and watch again and again. It's just funny. Maybe now Lord of the Rings is sort of edging in there. Probably by the time the trilogy's all out, probably that as one film. I could probably just put that on the DVD player in the background and just have it all at work all day long. I mean, other films sort of I liked for a while, and then I don't know, they sort of lose their shine or something like that, and you come back to it years later. In Star Trek films, I love the Wrath of Khan, but I watched that again recently and just realised how badly lit the film is. I mean, it's lit like it's in a shopping mall. You know, there's no sort of drama or anything. I mean, the later Star Trek films where the stories haven't been as strong, the atmosphere and everything has been brilliant. You look at First Contact and the way that's designed and the lighting on that, it's just phenomenal. Insurrection is still, I don't know. At the end of Insurrection, I thought, right, now I want to come back next week and watch the next episode, because it wasn't a movie. What I've seen of the new Star Trek and the trailers that are on the internet just looks gorgeous, because again, it's lighting, it's all about, and this is me approaching it as an artist, it just creates space, creates depth, and so as long as the story is as good as the pictures look, then I'll be very happy.
When you draw people, do you try to draw, do you just draw a costume like that, or do you sort of add scenes so it sort of shows how the thing goes together? How do they get into it, or do you leave that to the audience's imagination?
I think we're playing on your particular area of interest here. It does depend, actually. When you're working with American comics, for the most part, the costumes are sprayed on. There are no seams. There are no wrinkles. My favourite costume actually is Judge Dredd's costume. I just love drawing it because there's so many bits to it, and it's fun to establish as you're drawing it how much certain bits of it weigh more than others. There's tricks you can do with line strengths and shadow that sort of show that bits of costume are heavier than other bits of costume, and that's fun. You say working out the seams and everything on the Dredd costume are great. You know what buckles where and what hangs and what doesn't. The mechanism only 50s. But the eagle up on his arm with like a whole cantilever thing underneath. And there was a guy that made a proper Dredd costume about 10 years ago. He went to events, this is before the Stallone film. I went to events dressed up in it. I so managed to corner him at one point and said, look, you've got to pose for me, you've got to do all these. And he's going, why? I'm an artist, it's legitimate, you know. I want to take photographs of you, please. and seeing how he'd solved all those problems. So when I draw Dredd now, I've actually got a series of photographs of a guy dressed as Dredd that I can use as reference and sort of see what works and what really doesn't work, because you can't do one of the strong things in comics for dramatic purposes is what they call an up-the-nose shot, where in effect the camera's down here and you're looking up. You do that with Dredd, wearing that helmet, and you can see his face, because the helmet sticks out here. So I've got shots of this guy dressed as Dredd, like, see every detail in his face. So obviously when you do that with Dredd, the helmet squashes in on his nose, so it probably explains why he's narked all the time.
Let's be controversial here then, and this is my little bit of getting in on someone else who's videoing this right now. What colour do you see Dredd's costume as? I know I've asked you this question before, but what colour? Do you see it as black? Do you see it as blue?
I'd go with black. It's black leather, which, because of the way comics were coloured when Dredd started, and there was a sort of limited range of colours you could have, they sort of went for very bright, bold primaries. First time I saw Dredd in colour, I was very disappointed because he's got green shoulder pads which don't look dramatic at all. I also thought it'd be yellow or white or off-white or something, but the costume itself should be black. And as you say, quite a lot of artists draw it as a blue jumpsuit, which is a bit pervy, really.
The interesting thing is when Stallone did the film, he started looking at the designs, and he said he wanted the idea that Megacity 1 was collapsing in on itself, too many people living there, they couldn't live on resources. So he wanted any item that suggested growth, suggested natural life, was removed. So there's no green on Dredd's costume in the film for that reason. So does that...
That's interesting.
That's everything. Right, we'll ask one more question of you, and then see if anybody in the audience. Anyone want to ask a question? Okay, we've got, well, about 4 or 5 people there, so hopefully that'll lead to something else. Right, you're an animal lover, are you? Sorry. Yes. Right. So being an animal lover, what type of animals do you prefer, and names and types of animals? Oh.
I used to have 2 cats and a dog, and I only have 1 cat. One unfortunately died a few months back, but my wife stopped me naming animals when she realised what I was doing. The first dog we had when we got married was this insane collie cross, which I called Wes. Good name for a dog, shout dog. Wes, I'm sure back to you. We then had 2 little kittens, sisters together, and I named one of them Bromwich. And then my wife suddenly realised I was going to call the other one Albion, and stopped me and called it TC instead. I don't know what this says, but the only one still living is TC. And we now have a new dog called Moxie. And my daughter, loads of her friends have got dogs whose names begin with N and end with an E sound, so she wanted the same. So we just ran through this dictionary of names. It turns out that Moxie was originally a rival to Coca-Cola back in the 19th century. And its slogan was something like, gives you pep and makes you energised, something like that. So we had to check it into to make sure it wasn't something foul in Arabic or something. So we were wandering around the park shouting Moxie, Moxie, and something coming and hitting you was always a possibility. The dog tends to sleep in the studio during the day just to make sure that I don't go anywhere. You're staying here now, don't go. The cat wanders in and out as she feels, except in the evening when she seems to live on my lap. I just like having animals around because I'm, say, working on my own for most of the day. It's just nice to have company, even if it's not human. So I've always had animals, and something I enjoy having animals around. So I think I prefer cats simply because you don't own them, they own you, and they let you know that very, very early on.
Right, who wants to be the first to ask a question? Okay. Who is it? I can't see you.
Yeah, Steve.
Okay, Steve.
How do you approach cases, given that some of the characters you've done have been played by actors like in Doctor Who, or in other cases they have not been, i.e. if you've overtaken them yourself, or...
Yeah, no, okay. Can you repeat the question?
Okay, so this is a question, if everybody didn't hear it, about use of likenesses and non-use of likenesses in comics. I did a comic based on the Star Trek New Frontiers books that Peter David writes, which is set at the same time as Next Generation, Deep Space Nine. And what Peter did, or what his brief was basically, was to create an ongoing series of books that didn't have to worry about continuity. So it used minor characters from some of the Star Trek series and created some of his own. Now the trick there was that when I did the comic, several of the characters in that comic had already been played by actors. So, you know, Paramount had the likeness rights. So we were able to do that. But what that meant was I then had to cast everybody else in the comic, because if I sort of had some characters that were obviously based on people and some that weren't, it would stand out a mile. So I had to go off and cast for the characters. And I've done that with the Star Trek SCE books as well, because several of the characters in that were minor characters in Next Generation and Deep Space Nine, and several of the other characters aren't. The captain on the Da Vinci, which is the ship in Star Trek SCE, is supposed to be a gruff, older figure, or Captain Gold, and the only brief they gave me on that was, looks a little bit like Harry Morgan from MASH. So I was like, oh, okay. So I combined in the end Harry Morgan and my father-in-law, who loves coming around and posing. There's one Star Trek SCE book cover I've done which has my father-in-law as the heroic captain and me as the evil rebel leader. So, I do tend to turn up every so often in my own comics. I used to share a studio with a couple of other guys, David Roach and Dylan T, where I live in Cardiff, and we kept drawing each other into the stories, usually as the villains and usually meeting horrible ends. One of my favourites was a Batman and the Demon graphic novel that Dave drew, where I ended up getting gutted by the demon, so I'm hung upside down at one point. I didn't actually hang upside down, Dave sort of worked that out by just turning the camera upside down on me. You know, I only go so far for my art. Yeah. On things like the American superhero stuff, I tend to cast those as well. I like to think that the people I'm drawing are, you know, I treat them as real people. I have real problems with the cartoony style artwork that's very dominant at the moment in American comics, because I don't believe the characters, I don't believe they're real. The sort of stuff I really enjoyed as a kid was the work that John Buscema was doing on the Avengers and Neil Adams was doing on the X-Men. Because even though these weren't real people, bless you, there's a sense of authenticity to the work. I think it's, if you've got somebody like Superman or you've got somebody like The Flash, if you don't believe where the story's happening is real, then you can't accept that the elements of that story that are fantastic are going to affect you. You've got to believe that this is amazing. If everything's cartoony and something big and cartoony happens in there, it's like, well, you know, for the Powderpuff Girls, there's no credibility. One of the best things that Stan Lee did when he set up Marvel Comics, and it was almost by accident, was he set all the stories in New York. So that you read a Marvel comic, and if the artist has done his work, it all looks real. It's the real New York. So when you've got like a 55-foot tall Galactus storming through the streets of New York, knocking buildings over, it's suddenly impressive because it's a real place. It's something you recognise. Whereas Superman's in Metropolis, and you know, where's that? There's no credibility there. So for the most part, I try to reference stuff as much as I can. If I've got a story set in New York, I use a lot of New York reference. When I did the Peter Cannon Thunderbolt comic I was talking about earlier, I went to London and just photographed everywhere. So in fact, you could, in theory, follow my comic as a road map around the centre of London. You could, oh, you turn down this road and this is here. I just want to get that sense of realism to the work, though, just so as you as the reader get more drawn into the environment.
Does that answer your question, Steve? Okay, who's next?
Jan, what advice would you give to a budding young cartoon artist?
That's a very good question. When I got started, I was being told, oh, don't go into comics now, it's all about to die, it's only got 5 years left. I'd say that was 18 years ago. There's always work out there for artists. The trick is you've got to be good. I'd say what I was saying before about having a credibility to your work. Even if you work in a cartoony style, if everything seems real in that style, then you've got something there. I do a lot of work outside of comics now. I do a lot of illustration work for SFX magazine. Started to work for PlayStation 2 magazine now as well, doing stuff for them. And it's just the fact that I can draw stuff and it's recognisable. And in case the SFX stuff is funny, that I keep getting work with them. So, I mean, you're thinking from your point of view, are you? But, oh, hello. See you later. But I mean, there's places you can take your work to and sort of get yourself seen. When I started off in comics, there was a very strong fanzine market in Britain. I mean, I don't know what the situation is now with it. I think it's starting to come back up again. So I used to get work in print, so I could see how my work looked in print. When I went to college, which bizarrely wasn't to study art, but to study politics, which is a great help with dealing with comics companies. Politics are big in comics companies. I worked in the university print room, and I used to do fabulous. But he was just willing to go in there and just take the insults, take the comments, and just build on that the whole time. It's just, you know, if you've got self-conviction, there's no reason why you can't get through. So.
Anybody else? Okay, Vicky.
As an artist, illustrator, and artist doing it for a living, has anybody ever come up to you and said, I'd like to do this, and you thought, oh, or is it something you don't like, illustrating or drawing?
I'm trying to think. Well, actually, yes, there is something I've turned down. About 5 years ago, son of Bob Buconi, that owns Penthouse, suddenly thought comics were it, and set up a Penthouse Comics division. And they got in touch with me because I do realistic artwork, so, and that's what they wanted. And they were paying a phenomenal amount of money per page. I mean, it was just like I could actually draw 4 pages of pencils, and that'd be all I'd need to do for the month. And I just turned them down flat. I just couldn't. I didn't want to visualise what people would be doing with my artwork. I think that's probably what it was. So that's probably the only time I've done that. I mean, it's not to say that when I've done stuff I haven't had nudity in there, but it just seemed a little bit coarse. So, for the most part, I've enjoyed pretty much everything I've done. Even when I've done comic scripts that haven't been very good, I've found something in that story that interests me. I did a Green Arrow annual for DC Comics about 10 years ago, and the story was dreadful. They were doing one of their periodical crossover stories where they introduced a whole bunch of new characters, and the writer who was about to leave the book was really fed up, didn't want to do that. He wanted to write his days in Vietnam, which is a bit of a conflict with a story about new exciting superheroes. So I had this 55-page script through, which 35 pages were about his adventures in Vietnam. And I just said to the editor, look, do you trust me? And there's like a pause on the phone, you know, why? Because I think I can make this story better if you let me go with it. So what I ended up doing was repacing the story. All the Vietnam stuff, I created 9 panel grid pages, so 9 pictures on each page, fixed grid for the whole thing. And so what was 35 pages suddenly became like 15 or 16 pages in the middle of the book, and it actually worked. It created chapters in the book. So because the whole physical look of that sequence was different, it made it more interesting. It made it interesting for me as an artist because by doing so many panels and doing them so small, I was having to do different storytelling tricks I wouldn't normally do. So it's almost like I forgot the script and got on with the design. So it tends to be that sort of thing. When I've done comics right afterwards, I thought, why did I do that? But at the time, you believe it. I think I drew Slain for 2000 AD for a while, and it was the time of Slain the King, where he ends up becoming the Celtic king. And Pat Mills, that writes the comic strip, wanted to do this great magical adventure set around Glastonbury, and it was Slain going through the various stages of the zodiac that's apparently in the ground around Glastonbury Tor, which Pat worked out you could only see because they seeded ice crystals in the clouds. And I went along with this, and then it came out, and I suddenly thought, what the bloody hell was that all about? By the time I was there, and I believed it, but afterwards I was like, you know, Pat, you probably went too far with that. It's mad.
Okay, who's next? Melanie, I think I can just about recognise you back there, Melanie. Right, Melanie, what?
You've drawn the things that have been turned into films, and I just wondered what you thought of the films that came from them. For example, do you ever think people like the cast came in such and such parts?
Right, this is about comic characters have been turned into films.
Yes.
Yeah, that way around rather than no. Okay. Well, Stallone as Dredd. He was fine for the first 20 minutes. The first 20 minutes is a great Judge Dredd movie, and then he takes his helmet off, and it was like, what have you done? There's a horrible scene where Dredd is talking to the cadets and he's showing them how the weaponry works. So sometimes it doesn't. I thought, I'm watching entirely the wrong movie here. This is gone horribly wrong. That was a major disappointment. And there's brief flashes all the way through that movie where they got things right. They got the angel gang right. Do you think they got the angel gang right? Yeah. But the rest of it was just vile. And at the end, Dredd doesn't arrest Hershey for kissing you. And that should have been the punchline of the film. But there you go. Other things in terms of films. The X-Men was great. I thought the X-Men was a brilliant film because it actually took the essence of the comic and made it work in film. The scenes with Wolverine just, I couldn't believe how well that worked. That you could actually have somebody on screen with that stupid haircut and he could look threatening. How good is that? The Spider-Man film this year I adored. It was Spider-Man. I've got 3 daughters and my middle daughter who's 12 now. He's the only one that's really into comics. She's in the Beano Club and she reads wherever it comes through. I took her and my eldest daughter because this was before 12 age, I was just still 12 at that point. And my eldest daughter was really shocked when Uncle Ben died. And my middle daughter was like, that's not how it happens in the comics. They got it wrong. Continuity freak at 12, it's great. Other films they've done of comic stuff. The Batman films were okay. Apart from Batman and Robin, which of course there should be a fatwa declared over. What happened with that film? I mean, Arnie was just horrible. And George Clooney was the nodding dog in the back of the car, just the whole film. I think he had a sort of rubber brace on for the Batman costume to keep his head upright. That was awful. I'm trying to think other films have been made of comics. There was a horrible Captain America film. Have you seen the Captain America film?
Yes.
Rubber ears. He's got a mask and rubber ears. Why? What? Costume. Well, because Captain America's costume is a helmet. The ears stick out. Well, you don't know, yeah. But for some reason they decided the actors' ears weren't good enough, so they stuck rubber ears over the top. Which doesn't say a lot. And Captain America is the embodiment of wholeheartedness and strength and virility. And he escapes from the villains by pretending to be car sick. Oh! I'm sorry, that's bad. There was a lovely Doctor Strange TV movie that came out about 20 years ago, which they didn't get the costume right, they didn't get the characters quite right, but it actually had the spirit and the enthusiasm of the strip, so I really like that one. What else? In Smallville at the moment, I think he's great, because Smallville is young Clark Kent. And it's actually the old DC continuity before they did Crisis and revised everything, because it's Clark knowing Lex when he's a little kid, so he's brilliant. What else do we have? What other films have been made of comics? Say some names of films that
Hulk coming out next year.
Hulk's coming out next year, Daredevil's coming out next year. Daredevil is good. X-Men 2, yes, X-Men 2. With Brian Cox in it. Men in Black is an interesting one because there's like almost a sub-genre of comics that nobody read that got turned into films. You've got Men in Black, you've got Mask, Barbed Wire, Blade. Well, you see, Blade was just a minor character in Dracula, and so gave him his own film. And those seem to be the ones that worked the best. Up until, I said that up until the X-Men and Spider-Man. It's almost like they have problems with the storytelling. There's a lot of scuttlebutt on the internet at the moment about J.J. Abrams' script for the new Superman film, where Krypton doesn't explode. Which I'm thinking, well, that's probably the main part of the story. He's the last son of Krypton, apart from his cousins and his uncle and the people that live down the road, you know. Suddenly the tension of the character's gone, but we'll see. I mean, the guy writes Alias, so he obviously knows something about writing. Comics and film are close, but they're never going to be the same thing. There's things you can, well, again, this is before Spider-Man and X-Men, there's things I thought, well, you'll never be able to do that in a film. I never thought that I'd actually see somebody wearing a proper Spider-Man costume swinging through Manhattan, but there it is in the film. It's fantastic. It works. I always think that the best comic book film is The Matrix, because the Wachowski brothers used to write comics. Storyboarder Steve Scrooge used to draw Spider-Man. I mean, the fight sequences, the Spider-Man fight sequences. That fight in the subway station, and people are getting knocked through pillars and stuff. It's like an old Jack Kirby comic. It was amazing. I love that. Just nutso stuff. What else have we got? The Crow. Oh, The Crow, again, a comic that hardly anybody read, but made for a great movie. In fact, it's a better Batman film than the Batman films.
It's got the atmosphere, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It just feels, ooh, icky. Though I don't think they'd ever say, ooh, icky on The Crow. It's interesting. I mean, there's a lot more crossover now with people that work in comics and work in movies. You get movie writers writing comics. You've got Kevin Smith, Clerks and Mallrats and Dog and all that, writing Daredevil and writing Green Arrow now. And you're getting comic script writers writing movies. So it's very incestuous. You've got Jeff Loeb that used to do movies, who then went and wrote Superman for quite a while. And from that, he's now become the script editor on the Superman Smallville TV show. So there's lots of toing and froing on that. It all comes down to, I think, that comics is just a way of telling stories. Movies are another way of telling stories, and they do a certain degree little bits of adjustment to make them work in another medium. But if you do it right, again, Spider-Man, X-Men, it's fantastic, and it works. It brings out the best of both mediums. So, does that answer the question, or was it ramble answer?
I better let the secretary have his word.
Actors seem to have a fear of they get too good a role, they're typecast. Is there the same problem with comic artists? Do you get you would be artist of that comic strip?
Oh, typecasting in comics is terrible. I started at DC off the back of a British comics work I'd done, and they knew me for doing sort of slightly bawdy science fiction stuff. So I got bits of that to start with, and then I didn't get any superhero work because I wasn't a superhero artist. And I said, well, you know, I can draw them, so did some superhero stuff, and then I was a superhero artist, and that was all. When DC got the rights to do the TSR games as comics, you know, the Dragonlance and Spelljammer and Forgotten Realms, initially they were like, well, we don't want to use you because you're a superhero artist. And I was like, duh. Did some samples, got that work, did that for quite a while, and then when that license lapsed, I tried to get some superhero work, and it was like, yeah, but you don't do superheroes, you're the fantasy guy. I was like, just go back to the CV, see what I've done. And so yeah, there's a real case with typecasting. I think editors, because comics are a very fast turnover business, they want to know the guys that do whatever they do. You know, if you've got a guy that does really good street scenes and plainclothes stuff, then he's going to do a Vertigo comic about a guy wandering around the back streets of Manchester dealing with demons. If you've got a guy that can draw big, fantastic spaceships, then you're not going to give him that job, you're going to give him a job featuring big, fantastic spaceships. I like to think that I'm versatile and can do as many things as possible, and that sort of tends to, as I say, sometimes it just sort of typecast me. For a while in British comics, I did more writing than drawing, and I hadn't worked for 2000E for a while, and I got in touch with them to see if I could do some work for them, and he said, oh, well, there's no writing openings at the minute. I said, no, I want to draw. And there's this pause saying, oh, you draw as well, don't you? I'm like, yeah. This week's 2000E's got a Future Shock drummer in it, and now I've only been back working for 2000 for like the past 6 months, having worked for DC Comics for the past 12 years doing superhero stuff. And the editor of 2000 phoned me up and said, do you think you could do superheroes? Yeah, bit of a stretch, but I think I can probably do that. So that's how I got that particular job, on the off chance I might possibly be able to draw superheroes. Hey, and there's the comic. I know this is interesting actually, this story, because it's they're not calling them future shocks now, they're calling them past imperfect. And the idea of the past imperfect stories is that one significant change in history makes for a whole different story. Now, the guy that wrote this story, Gordon Rennie, decided that it's boring just to do what if Nixon won the election instead of Kennedy, which somebody did a couple of weeks back. He said, you've got to do the big stories. He said, what if all the superhero characters and all the serial characters and all the fantasy characters were real and existed in our world? How would that change history? So I don't know how well this is going to show, but the opening page of this features the attack on Pearl Harbor by Godzilla. Now that you couldn't do in a movie. Or maybe they will now.
Well, CGI, anything's possible.
Probably make a better Pearl Harbor movie than the one that came out.
Yeah, in fact, Ben Affleck is running down there just to... But, so that's it. I mean, comics are movies with an unlimited budget and no taste. Another question?
Are there any, when you talk about comic books and movies, are there any comic books that haven't been turned into movies that you would like to see in movies, or vice versa, any movies that you would like to see made into comics?
Oh, I always wanted to do a Blade Runner comic. That would have been wonderful to play with that world on a weekly basis. Comics that haven't been made into films that should be. I don't know.
Well, I'd say was because some time ago I should say I don't think I read a Road Trooper comic and thought at the time of reading it, hey, this was a really great movie.
They probably cast Vin Diesel though. So. He's big and bald, he can do it. No, he's not what? He could be good.
20 years ago.
Yeah, Rooker had 20 years ago, it would be great.
20 years ago, that's what said about Judge Dredd being Stallone. What do we know?
Yeah. No, I always wanted Clint Walker to play Judge Dredd. He was like way too old or dead at that point, so he's actually got the right physique for it. I don't know what the character. Road Trooper would be very good. Because it's big future war stuff. You know, spaceships landing, loads of troops getting blown up, and the costumes that the uniforms that Dave Gibbons designed were brilliant because it was supposed to be happening in a heavy gravity world. So they've got these big cumbersome spacesuits that are almost like samurai outfits. And in the middle of it, you've got this skinny guy with blue skin just walking by, genetically engineered so he can stand pressures and what have you. And where else is there? Some of the American ones. I'd love to see a proper Doctor Strange film. And at one point, Bob Gale and Roger Zemeckis were going to do one, going Back to the Future. And I'm sure they'd have done it right and they'd have been great. Who you cast as Doctor Strange, I don't know. There's been some strange casting on the films that have actually worked, I think. I mean, I wasn't too sure about, what's his name? Who's played Peter Parker?
Peter Parker.
Tobey Maguire.
Tobey Maguire, yeah. I wasn't sure about him, but he was perfect. He was great because the thing that they got wrong on the old, well, so many things got wrong on the old TV show. The thing they got wrong on the old TV show was that they cast Nicholas Hammond, who was like generally very good looking, and he's generally very good looking, and he's now got powers. Whereas Tobey Maguire is a geek who then gets powers, who becomes a geek with powers. And he's like, I can fly, and swing from buildings. I mean, the scene in the film that I just thought captured the spirit of Spider-Man perfectly is where he rescues Mary Jane. He's standing on the rooftop and he says, "You know who I am. I'm your friendly neighbourhood Spider-Man." You think, "Oh God, you idiot!" You know, but he's just so in love with what he's doing that it worked perfectly. It communicated the character, 100%. What else could you do? There was talk of a Sergeant Rock film a few years back where they were going to cast Arnold Schwarzenegger, which I just wanted the scene where they're in the trenches and Rock turns to the group and says, "One of us is a German spy, I don't know which one." Sorry? That would have been a movie. A very short movie.
You've done quite a lot of film and TV tie-in or spin-off comics. Given totally free reign, which TV series would you like to do a comic strip of that's not been done before?
Easy, Highlander. You've got the whole of history to play with. You can have any kind of battle at any time. I thought the Highlander TV show was great. The characters they set up in there were just great, sort of archetypical characters. I love the idea of Mythos being this guy that's lived since the dawn of time. And the only thing he's bothered about is where he's going to get another clean pair of socks. He's lived all this time and he's got no wisdom at all. I thought that was fantastic. And Adrian Paul could probably be the next James Bond. I mean, he's got the right looks for that sort of thing. It just worked great, and it would make a brilliant comic. And I say, you flashback to Battle of Culloden, or you could do First World War stories, or you could do anything. I mean, in theory, you could even go into the future of it, because obviously there should only be one, apart from the 300 other you keep bumping into every week. I think by the end of about the 5th season of Highlander, I worked out that like 1 in 5 people on the planet is a Highlander. Plays hell with the pensions industry, doesn't it? Taking pensions for the next 300 years. That would be good. What else would look as a good comic? There's the thing that's mentioned in the comic book actually about Star Trek is the fact that I always thought Star Trek was a comic strip that got turned into a TV show. because for some bizarre reason, TV21 had the rights to do it as a strip before the BBC started showing it. So, you know, so my little brain was like, oh, look, they made a TV show out of this. Isn't it? So drawing Star Trek in comic form to me is like taking it back home. I don't know, there's any TV shows that have been good comics.
I must admit, the thing that was going through my mind was interesting, because when we met before, we ended up talking about sheer gratuitous violence and puppets in Short Captain Scarlet. And now, of course, they're talking about possibly doing a new CGI series.
Well, they've done some tests, haven't they, already? There's actually some footage out there with CGI.
So it's almost like, you know, you're bringing an animated form into a comic form, which again is a movie, so you've got the third element, haven't you?
This actually is an interesting development as well, that you get comics now, or allegedly comics, I mean this is like a hybrid medium, of things like But Ugly Martians, where they're not comic strip as such, but just grabs of the episodes and just rendered in comic form. The big project I just finished is an adaptation of a Welsh language film called The Mabinogi, which deals with all the Welsh myths and legends. And they decided what they wanted to do was to do a comic, do a graphic novel based on their film, and they got in touch with me about writing it. And I said, well, I'm not going to write it if all we're going to do is just have, like, you know, 6 screen grabs a page and that's it. I said, if you bring me on the project, let me design it as well. Let me treat it as a comic and take the elements in the film and make them work in comic strip form. So that's what I did. So what they ended up doing was getting a script from me and layouts from me for comic pages. And because I was actually working at the animation studio as they were making the film, they were able to move the characters on screen before they even filmed it. It's a pre-filmed artwork, so that it fitted the poses I put on in the comic book. So actually the shots in the comic, which is the adaptation of this film, that aren't in the film, because I just wanted them in the book and they were able to move the characters around and change the backgrounds and what have you. So that was quite interesting, because that was almost like directing a comic as opposed to drawing a comic. I boarded it out and made it work, and what's nice about it is, well, from my point of view, is if I look at that, it looks like, if it makes sense, it looks like a Mike Collins comic, even though I didn't draw a single panel in it, because of the way the storytelling works, because of the way the panels follow. And the other nice thing about it as well was that there's these fabulous extended sequences that I didn't have to spend all day drawing. I could just scribble and say, and that's scene 35, bit 7 minutes, that bit of drawing there, put that one in. So there's a great sequence in the film where one of the characters turns into an eagle having been hit by a spear. Now on film that lasts maybe 2 or 3 seconds, but because I was actually given unlimited space to do the comic, which is brilliant, it's just like, how long do you want it to be? You know, how long do you want it to be? And I'm like, thank you. I actually have that sequence going over 5 pages in the book, because it's a magical transformation sequence, and I really wanted to show up the fact just how amazing that was. If I'd done it so it matched the beats of the film, it would have been over in a couple of panels. But because I can do, because I was given so much free rein, I was able to do that. And other sequences where just 2 characters standing around talking, which in the film lasts 10 minutes, are like 3 panels in the comic. Because that's just dull, you know, to turn back, oh look, they're talking, oh look, they're talking a bit more, oh now he's talking. Dull, dull, dull. So I was able to play the graphic aspect of that, so that was an interesting crossover between film and comics. And I think I probably wandered off the point, I didn't even know it.
Well, interestingly, because maybe moving slightly off the point, and we're talking about graphic art, art as film, what do you think of the original Lord of the Rings? Because of course that was actors who acted the roles and then they turned it into effectively graphic art. So is this an earlier form of before CGI was around, or?
Well, actually it goes back to Snow White, because all the Snow White stuff in Snow White 7 Dwarfs is what they call rotoscoped. So it's basically filming somebody doing the actions, photocopying that and tracing it down as artwork. So there's a lot of so, except in certain places in the Lord of the Rings movie, they didn't even bother drawing it, they just ran the photocopies. The attacks were all York, so actually if you look at it really closely, you can see all the photocopying grey going on there. It's very, very strange. And they ran out of money towards the end. And apparently they do have the soundtrack for the second half of it. It exists in a vault somewhere, but they just never animated it. So you can always do a radio play, with John Hurt still playing Aragorn. I mean, I remember seeing that when it came out in Birmingham, and the cinema was packed, the people were lining the aisles. It was such a big deal, and it was, you know, I think they've really dropped the ball on that one, which is a great pity, because it should have been great. It should have been really good. It was, what do I think of it as a film? I don't think it really worked, because they tried to get too much story in there. What Peter Jackson got right with his Lord of the Rings is he just let the story breathe. Whereas they just, you know, rack it through it too fast.
Anyone? Can you say your name, please, as well?
So, Huxley, the way the industry is going at the moment, so going books, you know, it's going more towards e-books. Where do you see your side of it with the printed magazines lasting very much longer, or?
Right, so the question's about whether e-books, so you know, books to print are going to outdo print. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think. I mean, you read stuff on the net. I mean, the thing with the Star Trek books I do the covers for is you have to download them, and you can either print them off or just read them on a pilot. But it just seems unnatural to me. I mean, when they send me the scripts through to do the covers, I always print them off because I can't read them on screen. It's just like, so I got. And bless you, bless you, guy. The thing about getting a physically printed book is that nothing beats it. It's just great having that there. You look at how many new magazines are coming out all the time. I mean, it's a big business. I think it's actually an even bigger business now. The thing with the Star Trek e-books, I think they sell better as collections when they finally see print like a year and a half later than they do on the internet. I mean, there's some of the best-selling e-books, but I think, as my editor said, it's like being the best hockey player in Northampton. You know, it's not really that much to shout about. You know, it's for me, in terms of producing the work, there's been almost a revolution. When I do work for, say, SFX magazine and do illustrations for them, the artwork only sees life in print. Because I do the artwork in pencil, scan it into the computer, then paint in the computer. Then I email off that digital painting, which they then drop into the magazine in Quark Express, and then it sees print. So the only time that artwork is real and physical is when it sees print in the magazine. So I've got like a black and white thing back in the studio, but that never leaves my office. And I say that the digital files, if they're not that big, I don't even put it to disk. I literally email the artwork off. So they can sort of ask for an illustration on Monday. If I get the roughs approved on Tuesday, they can have the physical artwork in their office on Wednesday. It's just, whereas in the old days, you'd go off and draw it and paint it, and then wait for a referral back, and then they still take 30 days to pay though. That's not very good. Not sure you can speed that particular one up.
So since you mentioned computers and computer art, so you don't have a fear of technology? You just adapt to the technology that's available to do your job in hand?
Yeah, but I just like gadgets. I mean, I've recently upgraded. Well, I had to upgrade my computer because I was running on a deadline. I did some illustrations for SFX and for PlayStation 2 at the same time, and my machine just went and died on me. And it was just like, now what do I do? Now I get out my plastic and got in PC World and buy a new computer. And I did that, got it home, and the machine I've got now has a 120 gig hard drive, which you could hide a town in. Why do I need all this space? What am I going to do with it? It's got a fast processor on it, it's wonderful. So I ended up finishing the artwork. It had, what have I got, 128 meg graphics card. I don't know, these things are just numbers to me. Numbers and names, but it's fast. It's great. So I like playing with the toys. One of the things though that I always do when I do computer artwork is that the original I scan in is as finished as I want it to be. So if I'm doing one of the Star Trek covers, I do fully rendered pencils. So that I've got a fully rendered pencil drawing which is then painted in Photoshop on the computer. But I've never got the nerve up to do what a guy I know in comics does, which is to actually pencil on the computer. Which is the whole thing on the computer. That would just drive me nuts. I don't know how you do that. I like the spontaneity of doing pencils and rubbing them out and smudging it and playing with it, and then say rendering colours in the computer. But I like technology if it works for me. I just realise how dependent I've got on it.
So in short, you can work a video recorder with the programming, can you? I can't. Right, anybody else? Yes, Chris.
You've done sort of all sorts of designs for vehicles and technology devices in the comics you draw. What would you say has been one of the most interesting things you've had to draw?
Oh dear. The one thing I really enjoy drawing, again, it's going back to Judge Dredd, is Mega City 1. This Mega City 1 is so big and stupid and curvy and overgrown that it's just fun to play with. You just build strange cities. I mean, and one of the things I do is get back to the credibility thing is that I've got loads of photographs of cities in Japan, contemporary Japanese architecture, and I start using elements of that in there as well. So I'll have a building in, there's a building in Kyoto I've used a couple of times because it's just fantastic the way it's designed. And when it turns up in Mega City 1 or it turns up in one of the Star Trek comics I drew, I just make it like 50 times bigger. So where there's one window, I've got like 7 or 8 windows high. Just make the whole thing enormous and just play with that. I've just done a strip I'm working on at the moment, which features a library planet. And it's supposed to look like skyscrapers until you look at it closely and realise they're all book stacks. So it's only when it's close up you can see like the spines of the books, but that was quite fun to work out because it's supposed to be a very regular and regulated environment, so it all had to work in perspective. So I tend to get lost in doing things like that. I quite enjoy playing with perspective. Designing vehicles, I don't know. I went through a phase, I'm probably still going through a phase, of using old British cars as a basis for science fiction vehicles. There's quite a few of my comics that feature Morris Oxfords, souped up. Little techie bits thrown on top of it. But things like that I think are fun. I love picking up books like the making of Star Wars and what have you, just to see what these guys just do for a living. I think it's great. You know, so here's so much money, go into a corner and just draw spaceships all day. Yeah, great, okay. And here's another one. It's just fascinating coming up with the stuff that suits. That's the important thing. You know, if you're drawing a particular type of spaceship to suit a certain race, you're going to think, well, how do they stand in here? What do they use? You know, what was their aesthetics? And that's quite interesting to do in the background stuff. It's stuff that people reading the comic aren't going to notice as you go through, but from your point of view as the artist, it's really, you know, it's really engaging. So it's fun to do like that. But back to the question, make it City 1 every time. It's fun. Do we have another question? Do we have another question? Okay, I was thinking.
Right, right. I mean, the immediate thing that comes to mind is when we're talking about comics being turned into film, is you had Dick Tracy and you had Judge Dredd. Now, to me, Dick Tracy, they never got the colour balance quite right. But Judge Dredd, to me, they got that very sort of loud, or, I don't know, acid, I don't know what you would quite call it. I don't know if you agree or whether you've got any opinions on that. Dick Tracy just seemed to get lost in its colour. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, Dick Tracy was an experiment, wasn't it? They had everybody wearing primary colours. But it just didn't quite pull together. I'm not sure what the problem was. Maybe because they were real people. I mean, even with all the guys in the latex masks, it's still... It was very uncomfortable. I don't think Warren Beatty worked as Dick Tracy either. So. But I mean, the first couple of Batman films are quite nice because they do have a mood established in the lighting and the costumes. We had like a school trip out when they made the first Batman film. All the people working for DC, they bundled us on a bus and we all went to the studios and looked at all the sets. And ooh, which was quite fun. And what was interesting is Anton Furst, as he designed Gotham City, his idea was that this was a city of no hope. If you go back and look at the film, all the statues have got slumped shoulders or have got their heads in their hands. You know, even the statuary is miserable. You know, the whole city works great like that. So it's quite nice when you've got a designer like Furst was on that really understands the mood they're trying to get across, as opposed to the strange psycho-disco stuff of the last couple of films. So, you know, giant statues with their arms outstretched so the bike can run on them. I think, no, this doesn't happen. It was just too unreal. So I think Dick Tracy and the last couple of Batman films suffer because they're inappropriately designed, or just designed all the way to hell.
Perhaps a rotten question. Some of us are old enough to remember it. If you were made to make a choice, Dan Dare or the Trajan Empire, because basically they're roughly the same time, but it's very similar in its kind of artwork and its colour. Or would you not wish to make a choice of which you would choose to read?
Well, that's a good question because, yeah, but which Dan Dare though? I mean,
Dan Dare as a whole.
Dan Dare as a whole. Dan Dare's very, very British. It's the happy military guy that goes off and fights the damned Martians. all stiff upper lip, and his mate from up north, who's there to say all the cute, cuddly, working class things. And I was like, well, that's okay. That never spoke to me really. Trigon Empire looked pretty, but the story just was aimless. It just went everywhere. But I mean, I can't really complain of that because I collect a lot of European comics, and I don't understand a bloody word of them. In fact, some of my major disappointments have been when some of these books have been translated, and I realised how bad the stories are. I was keeping the French because I can stumble through French, and of my understanding, it's a great story. I don't want to see it translated if I understand how bad it really is. Quite often I'll go for something because of the artwork. So Trigon Empire maybe went with Don Lawrence, but then again, Frank Bellamy took over on Dan Dare, and that stuff was amazing. So that's the best British comic I've ever. So it's a tie.
Anybody? Silence? Chris, you got anything else? No? Well, I'm sort of running a little dry here, I must admit. How big is your bill a month when you go down and buy, obviously, your European comics, your American comics? Do you have newsagents that you sort of have to go and ask for the most obscure thing, and they're not used to it? And now they're obviously used to you, but...
Yes, how big is my bill? Well, it's all tax deductible for me, which is great. And my wife despairs that I have a studio full of Star Trek phasers and tricorders, but I love the fact that I can claim them against tax. The European albums I tend to buy when I'm abroad. There's some places in Britain you get them, they tend to be fairly expensive. But whenever I've gone on like a beer run to Calais, everybody else is stacking up at the back of the car full of crates of beer, and I'm down the front of the comics aisle just stacking a trolley full of albums. And they're like, what have you got? I've got this. And they're going, oh, okay, yeah, we've got the Stella, so we're going. I don't know, I probably spend a couple $100 a month on comics, but again, it's almost like keeping up to date with what's out there. It's sort of being aware of what the market is and what sells and what doesn't sell, and what can inspire me and what can depress me. And some sorts of Babylon 5 comics there.
Fucking hell, what your name been on?
Oh.
Oh, sorry.
All by me.
Just still, for people that like souvenirs and convention guests, we've got a whole stack of selected comics with their underscore words on. I've got to pick them out. We've got a large selection of comics, everything from Babylon 5, Superman, all Babylon 5, Star Trek, Batman, more Trek, Thunderbolts, etc., etc. We're selling comics once these panels finished. I'm sure you'll autograph them to whoever you want, whatever. Do you want to do it in here if you're winding down, or do you want to do it outside?
Okay, so Mike's set about there, is he?
Well, whenever you like.
Okay, so I can do it.
Okay, so once this finishes, before the next panel, we'll be outside, and we're selling comics and we're selling them.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I have a stack of original art with me as well, if anybody's interested in buying original artwork. Star Trek, Batman, Superman, Judge Dredd, Doctor Who. It's changed out the outfit, but it's still there inside of it.
Yeah. Well, I've got to get enough of that anyway.
Yay! Right, okay. See, you should have conducted the interview in there, that would have been good.
In actual fact, I think it's either One Cult TV, or I think one of the Blake 7 conventions. Gareth Thomas, who plays Blake, he's well known to like his alcohol, and the person doing the interview apparently did interview Gareth Thomas dressed in the Dalek outfit, complete with Dalek speak. So the moment Gareth delayed, you will answer was coming out at high speed. But anybody got any final, very quick questions?
All bits of kit you've drawn, which ones would you like to have?
All bits of kit. Wouldn't mind Dredd's bike. That's big. Of course, it's so big I couldn't park it in the driveway of the house. So damn wide. Actually, that's an interesting one because it can't corner. The wheels are too big. How do you go anywhere on that damn bike? That would be good. What else would I like? Nice to own the Enterprise. Any of them. Just say a letter. Yeah, that's it. Just teleport everywhere. I don't know. That's a strange question. It's a very strange question, actually. Yeah, why did you ask me that?
Seemed like a good idea at the time.
Well, the thing with, like with Star Trek, I mean, all the gadgets and gizmos I have. I mean, they don't work, but I have. So I'll get the kids wandering to the studio and having phaser fights with a classic Trek versus Next Generation. So it's quite nice to have the bits of kit around.
Who wins?
Who wins?
Yeah.
Classic.
Well, they work pretty well.
Yeah, they do. Next Gen, let's go. That hurts a little bit.
Maybe that stings.
Yeah. Ooh. Have you heard the Eddie Izzard routine about that? Of the other settings of phasers. It's one of those, you know, the Klingons are coming towards you. You set a particular thing out. You zap the Klingons. They go, "Oh, I fancy an ice cream."
I think on that point, we're running down, and obviously Mike here will be signing for you if you wish to go and get anything signed. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for attending. And Mike Collins is there, please.